keeping an eye on imaging. Discussion and commentary based on articles from JACC, Cardiovascular Imaging.
Good day and welcome to JACC Imaging at CVN. My name's Tom Marwick. I'm one of the associate editors at JACC Imaging, and I'm here with Dr. Ramtula from USC. Welcome, Dr. Ramtula. We're here to discuss a very interesting and important paper that's a sub-study from the SEAS study about the issue of pressure recovery and its importance in clinical evaluation of aortic stenosis. Dr. Ramtula, you wrote the editorial about this paper. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the paper's about and why it's important?
The paper deals with pressure or calculation of really, when you want it, aortic stenosis. And they point out that you have to take pressure recovery into account. And mostly they then talk about which is the best way to do that. And they go back to a concept not originally put forward, but a way of calculating that by keeping the size of the aorta, ascending aorta into account, because that determines it. And then they develop what is called the energy loss index. They showed that at least when you're doing this by echo Doppler, that this is best calculated at the sinotubular junction and not at the valve, at the sinuses or even distal ascending aorta. And the very interesting part about that is that the value that they came up with is very similar, is in fact identical to what we've been using for the last 40-odd years to determine aortic valve area. And this is not effective orifice area, which is where at Doppler it has been calculated, means it's being done at the opening of the valve and therefore ignores everything beyond it.
Okay.
And the value that they came up with is 0.6 centimeter square per meter square or less, which is identical to what has been used since the 70s and 60s for severity aortic stenosis by cardiac catheterization. And if cardiac catheterization is properly done, then the aortic pressure should be measured about 3 centimeters beyond the aortic valve. And the interesting thing about all of this, in my view, is not pressure as much as energy.
Yes, okay. So really we have here two potential means of assessing aortic stenosis severity in terms of area or gradients, either corrected or uncorrected for pressure recovery. And the argument here is that we have been overestimating the severity of aortic stenosis by not accounting for pressure recovery. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, but I like to think of that, the whole concept and the physiology behind it in terms of energy. And the important reason for the left ventricle to exist without aortic stenosis and in aortic stenosis is to perfuse the body.
Sure.
That's what it is. So the question really one should think about, I think about, is what is the energy that is required to perfuse the body.
Okay. So
obviously it has to get past the valve. And there is little or no energy loss in terms of loss of energy, and I'm talking of different forms of energy, getting the blood across a normal aortic valve.
So we're used to the validation of aortic stenosis severity on the basis of area as originally validated by the Mayo Group now a couple of decades ago. How does this information jive with that original description?
Well, the trouble with that has always been that they start off by looking at the world from the echo lab.
You mean that's wrong?
Well, I'm sufficiently old. Some people think too old and about to fall off the edge soon. Like to look at it in terms of the patient.
Okay.
Okay, so the issue is for the patient what is important, and for the patient and the function of the left ventricle is to perfuse the body.
Okay.
And so if one looks at it from that way, and you go back to before the Mayo data, you go back to initially by Gene Brownmore in 1963, when he determined or deduced that a 50 millimeter or greater gradient. But of course, at that time, it was cardiac catheterization, so it was between the left ventricle and the ascending aorta. And then subsequently, since at that time, most of the aortic stenosis was really congenital, and they were children, so one had to correct that for body size. And if you correct that for body size, then it turns out it's 0.6 centimeters square per meter square, exactly with the same level as now Eli has come up with, Eli being energy loss index. And that actually goes back to, yes, that's what Gene Brownwell said. It's amazing how correct he was 40 and 50 years ago.
So
but the issue is that the natural history studies prior to valve replacement is what the issue is, what it was. That's never going to be done.
So it's nice, really, that we've gone back to a full circle here with this description. So in summary, this is an approach of correcting an inherent error in the way that we've assessed aortic stenosis severity by taking into account the ascending aorta. And it's something that has now been applied in a large population in the SEAS study, and it's something I think clinicians should have an interest in and think about correcting, in particularly in various scenarios.
Yeah, and they conclude that's the way to do it. And that makes a whole lot of difference if you do it that way, because a lot of what they pointed out was calculated as severe aortic stenosis isn't so if you do it this way. And so one is making an error. And I think it'll be nice if we get to where we do it as energy loss index. Keep in mind that does take into account the issue of, what is the energy that has been required eventually to perfuse the body.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Dr. Ramtula. I think this is a very important paper. It's something that clinicians should have an interest in, and I would commend it to you. So thank you for joining us on JACC Imaging.